fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to episode 348 of the Falcoholic Live, presented by FanDuel. I'm your host, Kevin Knight, joined by my co-host, Adnan Ikic, as always. And back for the first time in the 2025 regular season, we got Joe Patrick at JAPatrick200, now the host of Joe Patrick on Football. Joe, I know it's been a different season. Joe's been busy at the facility on Wednesday, so it's been tough finding a time when we could get him on, but it's the bye week, so it's the perfect opportunity to get Joe back into the Falcoholic Live. Joe, we're happy we could make it work. How are you doing now going into week 5?
I'm doing great. Kevin asked me to come on last week, and I refused to come on after a 30-point loss. I said only after wins will I. No, I'm just kidding. We got the old bye week break. So with the bye, I've got the bye week beer going on. I don't normally drink, but hey, we're going wild on a bye week, and like you said, a lot of good stuff to talk about after kind of a cathartic win there.
Yes, definitely get back on track win, and that's kind of the theme of this show. Is I think the Falcons are on track at this point, despite a pretty wild start that didn't really go as expected at all. Falcons, I think, are on track at this point based on preseason projections, at least my projections and those of us who did our preseason thoughts. But we're going to get into all that and talk some bye week stuff, talk about this victory over the Commanders and our sort of thoughts on the rest of the season. Before we do, though, got to welcome in my co-host Adnan as well. Adnan, how are you doing tonight?
Doing well. I'm glad that the team bounced back a little bit, and I'm glad that we're not going into the bye week on a sinking ship right now, because the vibes, had they lost to Marcus Mariota this past weekend, the vibes would have been more in the mud than ever before, honestly.
Yeah, catastrophic vibes, I would say. And, honestly, like, Mariota gave it his all. Like, that was maybe one of the best Mariota games I've ever seen. I thought he played pretty lights out, except for that interception where I don't really know what he was thinking there. I mean, he probably thought like, oh, Xavier Watts can't get there, right? That's not possible. And he got there. The short answer is he got there. I thought Mariota actually played great. And the Commanders really put up a hell of a battle, despite being down a couple players. But the Falcons, thankfully, were able to take care of business and beat a Commanders team that was not at full strength, and make sure they got back in the win column, got to 500, and survived this September, which was a pretty brutal start on paper for them. Ended up being not what we expected necessarily, but we'll get into all that, guys. And not necessarily the start that we were expecting, but the record is 2-2. Everything's fine, and the rest of the season isn't exactly what we expected either. There's a lot to talk about there. Been a total bloodbath injury-wise for the entire NFL. Fantasy people, I'm sure you guys are well aware that if you're on a fantasy team that doesn't have a catastrophic injury at this point, you are a very lucky person, because I have 6 fantasy teams, and every single one has lost a primary player at this point. So in that way, it kind of evens the field, and that we're all suffering, but it still sucks.
I'm in the middle of the Michael Carter versus Amari DiMercado wars of who's it going to be? Who should I start? Should I start Michael Carter this weekend? So I'm reading up on the report.
I have to start Michael Carter in a league, and I will start Amari DiMercado or Michael Carter pretty happily in some of these leagues, given that I have Bijan in a bunch of leagues, so he's on bye, and I had James Conner in a bunch of leagues, and he's hurt. So I was like, oh, my RBs look great after week 1, and then now we're struggling. But I'll save the rest of the fantasy takes for the fantasy experts. We just dabble here on this program. But guys, we're gonna get into all the Falcons discussion tonight, talking about this big win, talking about 2-2, talking about the bye week, and hopefully how this team can take advantage of this early bye, which actually seems to be kind of hitting at the right time for them. And to kind of start off that note, before we go into week 4, Falcons have oscillated a lot in the sort of playoff odds, but right now kind of back to their preseason number. They're at plus 144 right now per FanDuel. And I think that's pretty fair, but Joe, I'll go to you first on this. I mean, just at this point, is this team kind of about what you expected in terms of record, in terms of playoff hopes, or are they above or perhaps even behind where you were thinking they would be?
Yeah, no, I think it makes a lot of sense that the odds are what they are right now, because I think a lot of people kind of thought that if this was going to be a playoff team, they would basically need to be 2-2 or better, obviously, at this point in time. But that 2-2 was kind of the mark you needed to hit at this waypoint of, it's kind of a neat waypoint because it's the first, it's the bye week, but it's also that kind of first quarter of the season. If you break the season up into fours, although it doesn't really work as neatly anymore since they added the game. But you get through that phase at 2-2. It's just kind of funny that I feel like it just didn't happen the way anyone expected, and maybe it feels worse in some respects considering that you lost at least one very winnable game of those four, and not only did you lose that, but you got blown out and historic proportions, as Raheem Morris said. Just a historic loss for the Falcons in that one against the Carolina Panthers. But, whatever, you take it, whatever way, it shakes out. And so, and again, to your point about the team bouncing back, like, I always felt like they would after Carolina. Like, I feel like with this team, it's never really been about them being able to do that kind of thing. For me, the what this team has to prove is an ability at some point during the season to like win and then kick on from a good performance and win again, and keep like kind of upping the bar for yourself throughout the season and be able to win 3 games in a row, 4 games in a row, that kind of thing to kind of get the ball rolling. And obviously that helps get your record to where you need it to be to make the playoffs. But also when you look at the teams that are really doing well in the playoffs, they have that kind of momentum going into it. So I think that's still a huge question mark for this team. And it's just, we'll see if, with Michael Penix and with this offense, they can get that ball rolling like we want to see it. But certainly I think what, Sunday proved is that they've got the talent and the potential to be able to do that kind of thing. And I think that with what we've seen from them on defense, actually, I think it maybe gives you the most hope that they can potentially do that, because what were we all saying coming into the season, guys? It was like they needed to be basically league average defense. And statistically, they're much, much better than that. I don't know how much I'm buying into the stats yet, although, I don't, the stats are that they are. But I think that has to give you a ton more confidence about what this team can be potentially if that defense can kind of even stay close to basically statistically what they are right now.
Yeah, the Falcons being an elite defense per DVOA, which DVOA are harsh graders. They try to. That's the thing about DVOA is it's defense adjusted. Like it's bait. They look at your opponent. They look at down and distance. They try to filter out the noise. So DVOA is one of the, I think, better metrics, especially with a small sample size, to try to figure this out. And DVOA has the Falcons obviously as the number 4 defense right now, which is beyond my wildest dreams, let's be honest, of what this defense could be. And I agree with Joe here that I don't really know that that's a sustainable pace, but if they could be top 15, that was, I think, what we were like hoping for. And I think at this point, like, they look like they could be better than top 15. I don't know if they'll stay top 5, let's be honest, but a lot of that might just be health. And like, if because so many teams are just like, the Ravens defense was expected to be pretty good and they've been ravaged by injury. A lot of, the 49ers have been absolutely devastated by injury as well. A lot of these good defenses. So like, it may just be a matter of which teams can manage to stay healthy. And that obviously helps. And the Falcons haven't been perfect in that respect either. AJ Terrell's missed the last 2 games. So, really going to be interesting to see how the Falcons finish, but you have to love the start from the defense. Offense, maybe less so, but we'll talk about that, I'm sure, as we get into this week 4 game here in a second. But Adnan, how are you feeling right now, sitting at 2-2?
I mean, I feel fine, especially given where we were at this time last week, where this Washington game all of a sudden turned into a must-win because you lost that very winnable Panthers game that everyone was expecting to win last week. I'm with Joe. I thought that, okay, this team needs to be at least 2-2 going into the bye week. If they're 1-3 with that Bills game on the other end of that bye week, it becomes it can become catastrophic fairly quickly with the Bills and 49ers coming up. But now all of a sudden that 49ers game looks a lot more winnable because that team is going through just another plague of injuries the way that they had last year. I think Brock Purdy re-aggravated his toe injury. George Kittle's on IR. Jennings, Pearsall are both.
Pearsall's out. Yeah, I have
Yeah.
Pearsall on every fantasy team, so I'm well aware of him being out now. So
The closest them to the season, but
Yeah.
that's for the show 3 weeks from now. But the point is that you just never know in the NFL. Some of these teams that looked like world beaters now look very mortal, and then some of these teams that you didn't expect to play very well now all of a sudden look a lot better. And I mean, just continuing to look forward, the Patriots and the Colts are two games which I think on paper looked a lot easier coming into the season, that are probably going to be a bit harder here in the coming weeks after the bye week. But at 2-2, I don't like the fact that the two losses were both in division. I think that could be something that really comes back to bite when it comes to that divisional tiebreaker against the Buccaneers, because now all the Bucs have to do is take care of business against the Saints as well as the Panthers, and they're winning the tiebreak no matter what happens in that Week 15 game. But now the Buccaneers look like one of the most injured teams in the league. Bucky Irving is on crutches. Baker Mayfield is still dealing with his own ailment. They have, two healthy offensive linemen. So I mean, it's sort of there for the taking. But the other end of that regarding tiebreakers is you beat two teams who you could potentially meet for wild card implications down the line, with Washington, who's probably not going to win that division, with Philly, with Minnesota, who's probably not going to win that division, with Green Bay and Detroit in it. So, you take the good with the bad, two NFC wins. Regarding the defense, I'm with you guys. I'm not buying the top five defense. You do have to look at the opponents. They so far faced McCarthy, Bryce Young, and Marcus Mariota, three of the four quarterbacks. But that's I'm incredibly happy that the defense is taking care of business, because how many Falcons defenses have we had in the past where they just face a backup quarterback or a backup level quarterback and they get plastered? I feel like we've seen that way too often. And I think right now we've talked about it with that bye week. We were cursing it at the beginning when we found out about it. Now it's like, thank God that the bye week is here, because this team can really sort of recalibrate. We feel good going into it. The offense can work on some stuff. The offense looked a lot better in this last game. The defense, Storm Norton and AJ Terrell could come out of it healthy. And then all of a sudden you can really sort of steer this ship correctly coming out of the bye, even if you don't beat the Bills, because I mean, nobody's really expecting to beat Buffalo. Buffalo, for all we know, Buffalo could go 16-0 this year, or 17-0 this year, the way that they've been trudging along. But just looking after that, like, you're at 2-2, you're in a fine position, and the season isn't lost, even though we could have come very close to this season getting derailed before the leaves even changed color here in Atlanta. So, thank God for that win against Washington.
Yeah. Go ahead, Joe.
If I could say one more thing about the defense too, it's not just the statistically we'll see where they end up, but I think what the encouraging thing is just the style of play that you're seeing from the defense, and just like the athleticism, the dynamism, the aggressiveness, the ability to pressure the quarterbacks, like that. Those are the elements of, I feel like, what you needed to see from this Falcons defense if they were going to be effective, and the ranginess that we're seeing from players like Xavier Watts, which was clearly missed last year for that in that safety partner next to Jesse Bates. And I think that the secondary is helped by Jeff Ulbrich and just having a simpler, I think, game plan going into some of these things, and just, not being asked to play a million different coverages and all these kinds of, fancy matching concepts and stuff, but just have some pretty, kind of simpler concepts and simpler understandings of what they need to accomplish. And we're also just seeing the players stand out individually. We talked about Xavier Watts, but up front also with guys like Rook, you figured you would need a big year from him. He's basically giving you, I think, what a lot of Falcons fans were hoping to see, if not more so. Same with Brandon Dorlus. Zach Harrison seems to really be progressing there as well. So on top of like the rookie edge rushers who've gotten off to some promising starts here early. So I think that, like, as far as the defense goes, like, I think that that's as important as like where they are statistically at this point.
Absolutely. I agree. Like, you watch this defense, it doesn't look or feel fluky. I would say that, like, sometimes when you see these really unexpected starts for units, you want to look at opponents, you want to look at turnover margin and stuff, like, oh, did they just get a bunch of lucky like the Jets fumbled 3 times last week. It's like, oh, well, if they're going to fumble it to you 3 times, that's going to make it a lot easier. It really hasn't felt that way or looked that way. In fact, I would say the Falcons, especially against the Bucs, dropped so many turnover opportunities. Like, I would argue that the turnover luck has not necessarily been, I would say it's probably been about neutral, so I really don't think it's something that's likely to regress. I think if anything, it could get better. But yeah, I mean, maybe, and moving into the Washington game here, I think that game showed that maybe, like, if you're going to go up against a man gap style team, there are some weaknesses up front, perhaps defending the run, and they don't have a true nose tackle. So those man gap teams that are committed to double teaming, your sort of penetration style nose tackle, which is what this team wants to play, they can create space, and you just have to be really on point with your tackling when you're going to be aggressive like the Falcons are being. And, what we saw obviously with that explosive run, Xavier Watts took a good angle, had a good shot at him, just couldn't bring him down. I didn't really see any schematic issue with that play, or like Watts didn't look like he played it poorly. Just Rodriguez made a great play, managed to shake him off, and that's the thing with this style. Like, if you're going to have all your guys at the line of scrimmage and you got one safety preventing a big play, sometimes they're going to break one. This is the NFL. Like, the other guys are pretty good too. So nothing is alarmed me. I thought this game against the Commanders with the defense, we could start out there. Like, this was probably their weakest game. I think the Commanders are probably also the second best offense, and you could maybe argue they would be the best offense if they were fully healthy. But I still give the edge to the Bucs there. But this Commanders offense, like, did not go in the tank, right? Like, I would say that Deebo Samuel really, like, stepped up and just completely took the reins of the primary target in the passing game. I think the Bill, Jaworski Merritt looked good handling that role as well. I think Marcus Mariota really stepped up. I think that was one of the best games I've seen him play. And the Falcons were pressuring him and really, like, they were not making it easy necessarily. It was just, I thought he was having a hell of a game. I think, most people would agree. I think he was like the second or third best quarterback per, like, a lot of advanced metrics last week. So, he really stepped up. I think he was probably motivated in this one for some reason, perhaps. But I think the Falcons defense managed to kind of match that energy. They definitely didn't make things easy on him, and they made the plays that they needed to make to keep this one in check. And that's what I want to see from this defense. That's really all we were expecting. So, I think this defense also has been absolutely, like, aside from that one Carolina touchdown at the beginning of the game in week 3, they have been smothering in the first quarter. Like, I think they're by far the best first quarter defense. I think against the Commanders, they had, up until like the last 10 seconds of the quarter, they were allowing negative yardage in that quarter to the Commanders. And the defense as a whole has just been awesome. And you mentioned it, Joe, like, all the young guys have really stepped up. The guys from last year as well. I think Dorless has been one of the best pass rushers for this team. Rook, I think, has stepped into a significant role. Zach Harrison looks like maybe the best interior player they have. We've seen both James Pierce and Jalen Walker make contributions. I think Walker's actually been one of this team's best run defenders, which I think that was one of the bigger questions we had coming in, was at his size, can he continue to do that? He was always a great run defender at Georgia, but you never know how those undersized guys are going to convert to the NFL. And he's been a great surprise there. Really showing his strength and understanding of that side of that part of the defense. But the secondary guys too, Bowman, again, a guy that's converting from safety. He's had some lapses, but also he's he plays like a bat out of hell, and I love it, and that's perfect for the nickel. He's been good there. Xavier Watts, we know what he's been doing, just been absolutely rock solid, and already 2 turnovers. I need to look this up. I was going to see like, how many interceptions did UCF legend Richie Grant have in his time in Atlanta? Because if it's 2 or less, then Xavier Watts has already matched it. So
I heard you guys talk about this, and
yeah, I'm going to look it up right
2,
now.
I can remember both of them actually.
Yeah,
I know he had one.
I know he had
Tampa
at
Bay.
least 2. Yeah,
I know he had one against Tampa Bay. He had one toward the end of a game against the Seahawks in a game. So yeah, you can look that up. But I also want to give credit to this front office for some of the signings that they've made, not just going into this offseason, but just in general, putting this defense together. And obviously, a premium free agent signing like Jesse Bates, obviously he's a premium player, but at the time it was, I don't know if it was like heavily criticized, but it was a little bit eye-opening, that they were willing to give, that money to a safety. It was record-setting money for a safety at the time, but obviously he's proven to be really good. But I think the more impressive signings have been these kind of like mid-tier free agency signings with Caden Ellis, Divine Diablo, and then Mike Hughes as well. I think you've like been able to identify traits in these players and, a pathway for them to be contributors to this defense. And, to some like Caden now is looking like one of the better linebackers in the NFL. And that one was another one where, it was heavily criticized as considered an overpay similar to Diablo. And while those players might have some gaps and, some strengths and clear weaknesses, they seem to do a good job in masking some of those weaknesses, at least at this point when they're relatively healthy.
Yes. And 3 picks for Richie Grant. He had 2 in 2022 and 1 in 2023. So, Xavier Watts got a little bit more work to do to catch up, but I believe in him.
That one.
I believed in him. Yeah. Exactly. He probably had like 3 almost picks in week 1. So, but yeah, Adnan, how do you feel about how this rookie class and these young players have panned out so far?
I feel fantastic. And it's just sort of, it feels justified all of the praise that the team received from us, from other local media, from national media. Like, this draft class coming out of it was just completely lauded because they finally sort of, and we talked about it, it felt like Terry Fontenot finally like sort of changed his approach a little bit, and he didn't galaxy brain the draft. He didn't overthink some of these picks. He just took the best players that came available to him. Xavier Watts is a great example. I don't think many people foresaw Xavier Watts falling to the 3rd round. I think Billy Bowman was also a player that sort of fell into their lap. And I mean, of course, Jalen Walker and James Pierce, we know the story there. Jalen Walker fell. I think many people expected him to go to Carolina. The Falcons weren't even expecting him to be there. But yeah, it feels like such a vindication that they're playing so well and they're contributing right from the get-go. I mean, you have 4 rookie defensive players who have made an impact on day one, and it is not a moment too soon, and it's nothing short than what you absolutely required, because Kirk Cousins is eating away at $40 million in dead cap, and you really could not be the players in free agency that you wanted to be because of that signing. I mean, they got Divine Diablo, who looks very good. Divine Diablo's exceeded all of my expectations. He's looked elite as a linebacker at times out there, but this really was the year where you had to get those contributions from these young players on rookie deals, these rookies themselves, because you really didn't have the money to work with to build up that defense over the offseason. And being able to get that contribution from guys you drafted, and from guys you drafted, after day one as well, that's immense. That's the sort of stuff that really sort of can build a team, not just for 1 year, but long term. Look at the New Orleans Saints as a perfect example. Right when it looked like the Falcons were going to have momentum to win the NFC South year in and year out after that 2016 season, the Saints had one of the all-time draft classes in 2017. And I'm not comparing this to that draft class yet. because the Saints really sort of hit home runs in 2017. And that draft class really propelled that team to 4 straight division titles. You know, of course, they already had some of the pieces there, but so did the Falcons coming into this draft class. So yeah, it's been great. It's been fantastic. It's been everything that I could have hoped that it would be after the draft happened. And I feel like the coaches, full credit to the coaching staff, full credit to Ulbrich and Morris for sort of trusting some of these young players and for putting them in positions to make an impact. Remember, in the early days of camp, it was Fuller and Watts. You didn't know who they were going to go with. They ended up going fully with Xavier Watts to come into the season. You know, they go with Billy Bowman fully to start the season as the nickel corner. Of course, D. Alford has also, even though D. Alford had a pretty poor game this week, he's been very better than I expected him to be through the first quarter of the season. But yeah, then of course you have some of these rookies from last year's class who didn't really contribute last year, now contributing, and the main two, Dorless and Rook Ororo. Rook, I think, is one of the leaders in the league when it comes to interior pressures. And then Dorless is a guy that he made an impact during camp, and he's one of those guys where I think I remember during joint practices saying, yeah, like, don't be surprised if he's your day one starter on the interior. And a lot of people, you know, overall, like probably in the national scheme of things, were like, who the hell is this? You know, not Oregon fans, that they love him up in Oregon. But like Brandon Dorless is a guy that's really making an impact. And that's great to see. He was a 4th rounder. So yeah, it's been good. It's been exactly what this team has needed. And without these rookies, they sure as hell would not be 2-2. I'll tell you that right now. It would be much, much worse.
Yeah. This class has, I think, been integral to this defense becoming a lot more dangerous than expected. And you love to see that. And hopefully, you know, again, like Fontenot being kind of, you know, obviously starting out being more on the pro personnel side, I think it was reasonable to expect that it might have taken a little while to get his feet as a drafter. I was hoping it wouldn't take this long, but if this is a sign of things to come, you know, sign me up, because this is a phenomenal class and I love everything about it. And it also, of course, last year's class is starting to look significantly better than we thought. So, you know, I hope it's a sign of things to come, both with the coaching staff and Fontenot himself as a drafter. But, you know, continuing on that theme, we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the offense, because that was obviously the big topic going into week 4 was, wow, this offense bottomed out against the Panthers of all teams. 0 points. Now, again, 2 missed field goals. Like they could have easily put at least 6 points on the board like that. But they didn't get past the 30, so they weren't going to put a lot more than 6 points on the board. But, you know, this team really struggled against Carolina, and Penix had his worst game. Now, week 4 comes along against a much better defense in the Commanders, who are one of the best run defenses in the NFL. They were allowing just 3.7 yards per carry going into this one. A team that was susceptible to some big plays in the passing game, but overall were like a top, I believe they were 10th in scoring defense. It's good defense. Falcons had their way with them. 34 points. I thought they could have had more. And, you know, Bijan obviously is looking on pace for an offensive player of the year type season, maybe one of the best seasons we've ever seen. I believe he's on pace for like 2,500 scrimmage yards at this stage, which would be close to an NFL record. Probably not going to stay on that pace, even if things go well. But, I mean, that's an incredible achievement through the first quarter of the season, one way or the other. But perhaps the most notable thing is, instead of, you know, there's a lot of fear about Michael Penix after that one bad game. Like, oh no, is this the real Michael Penix? Is he just going to be this volatile quarterback? Is he just not going to be able to get it together? You know, can he not target the middle of the field? Can he not hit receivers? Is he inaccurate? There's a lot of takes after 0 to 30, which we shouldn't be surprised. You know, you get shut out. There's going to be a lot of takes, but Penix bounces back, has arguably his best game as a pro against a good defense in the Commanders. How are you feeling now about Michael Penix going into the rest of the season, Joe, after week 4's performance?
Yeah, it's funny because like I feel like you still cannot really fully talk about this game in week 4 without talking about the game in week 3, because there's so much context that plays into where the team was coming out of that and then what they put on the board in that game on Sunday. And I was actually just looking at some of the EPA numbers earlier today and saw that game against Carolina, Michael Penix had the third worst game of any quarterback so far this season, with the third worst EPA, -25 in that game. Only Jake Browning and Joe Flacco had a worse game so far this season. And then last week puts up the fifth best game of any quarterback in the NFL. And by the time he had it, it would have been the third best game, because then the number 2 and 3 games came in that 40-40 between Dak Prescott and Jordan Love. But I think that shows a lot. I don't know. I think we're still too close to it to really be able to determine exactly what the difference was and why the turnaround exactly happened. We don't have the normal week of media to kind of get into it with a lot of the coaches and players and stuff that talk to them about it. So that's something we'll definitely do next week when we're back in the building. But I think it's really encouraging to see that you've got a young quarterback still at what he was making his 6th start at the time, going into that Carolina game. So between his 6th start and 7th start, able to make that kind of turnaround. I think a lot of people, again, myself included, thought that they would be able to bounce back. And I think that when you do lose a game in the fashion that they did, I think it does sharpen your focus. Like, players never want to say that it's like, they're any extra motivated for one week than another. And I'm sure they weren't. Like, I'm sure that, the players felt motivated going into that Carolina game. But I think that, one of the, I don't know if it's really a learning, but maybe just it was reinforced to me in that Carolina game, was that if your quarterback does not show up in a given game in the NFL, you just don't really have a great chance to win. And the more I've been able to reflect on that game, I think that Michael Penix was just bad. And for whatever reason, I'm sure that there were reasons that you can solely put on him, inaccurate passes that should have been completions that could have moved the chains in certain areas. And there's probably ways that he could have been helped by coaching staff scheme going into the game, like Drake London being used in the slot 18.6% going in that game. And putting that in context, he was using the slot 39% last season, 18.6%. The last time he was that low was that last game of the season of Arthur Smith's tenure in 2023. And even that 2023 season, he was playing much more in the slot than 18.6%. They basically moved him like week 4 of that season, basically into a higher slot role. So that he got 50% slot snaps in this game. And so I think those kinds of things help Penix and just having a better game plan. But, ultimately, I think what this team did in this week 4 game was just unlock some versatility that I felt like has been kind of latent, like sitting there, and we just haven't really seen it yet, like really be exploited, with like Bijan Robinson being able to be split wide. One of the things I know that Aaron Freeman has been hitting on this really since after the Minnesota Vikings game, about Charlie Warner kind of being used almost more like a fullback than a tight end. And it's really interesting. They were going oftentimes, or at least sometimes in this Washington game, with 11 personnel, but then they'd be in shotgun with Charlie Warner next to Michael Penix and Bijan Robinson split out wide. And that just creates some weird mismatches that teams have to kind of adjust to on the fly there. And I thought that it opened up Bijan for some easy catches. I think he's showing an improved ability, both mentally and physically, but mostly mentally, just to be able to know what to do when he's split out and being able to run some of those routes. Like I think Arthur Smith wanted to do when they initially drafted him, but Bijan just wasn't ready for that yet. And they weren't like basically equipped to really coach him up to do it that quickly. So I think that we just saw some of these kind of pieces coming to fruition. And that's what gives me optimism for this offense, that they can, they found something in this Washington game that they can continue to go forward with.
Yeah, I agree. I think this was a big step into stabilizing the offense, showing some things that we didn't see enough of in the first 3 weeks, but I think that they have to be staples. They still didn't use a lot of play action, but they're working it in more. We've seen Kyle Pitts become kind of like the de facto number 2 receiver right now, whereas, and that's not even counting Bijan, who might be the de facto number 1 receiver. But, he's had an insane, yeah. And Drake looks healthier again. That's a big thing. And if you had told me before the season that Darnell Mooney would just not really be much of a contributor due to injury and missing all of training camp through the first 4 games, I would have been like, yeah, this offense is going to struggle. And like at times they did, but they have managed to kind of weather that. I think they were really wise to emphasize Pitts more than Ray Ray. And again, like, I don't want this to be like an anti-Ray Ray thing, because I think we all love Ray Ray, and he's more than delivered on what the Falcons brought him in here to do. But Ray Ray McCloud, I think, is like a solid wide receiver 3, a starter caliber player, but not a difference maker per se. Pitts, I think, in his current incarnation, is more of a difference maker. He is a guy you want to get the ball to. He looks reinvigorated. He's a yards after catch threat now. That just wasn't something he was doing over the past few years. He looks totally confident, and looks dynamic. Like, I think he's fully healthy, maybe for the first time since that devastating knee injury a few years ago. And I love that he's become a true difference maker in this offense, and I hope that he continues to be emphasized there. But yeah, Adnan, curious what you think now after week 4. How do you feel about the trajectory of the Falcons offense?
I'm relieved. I'm relieved after that week 3 game, because this was the week 4. This was the most important week of of Michael Penix's very early career so far. Seeing how he would bounce back after that debacle in week 3, and it was just inexplicable what we saw from him. And I know that Zach Robinson, of course, got a lot of the heat, and a lot of it was deserved. But I mean, we talked about it after that game, that Michael Penix himself deserved plenty of blame for it, because he just looked so gun shy, and he looked like he just wasn't taking. Looking at the all-22 film, he just wasn't, taking some of those open shots that were right there for him downfield. And, sometimes when he would, the ball would sail, it would be uncatchable, it would be very difficult for the wide receiver. And for him to bounce back after that with one of, the best games that we've seen from him so far, it was huge. It was huge, and more than anything, it was very, very relieving. Because especially for a young quarterback, after a game like that, if you sort of stack some of those performances together, it can become very, very dicey, and it can become very tricky. But I mean, look, it was just one bad start. Michael Penix has all the tools. It was not. I don't know what people were thinking, saying that he's a bust. We need to bench him. Just standard overreaction in a sport where you have to marinate on a game for 7 full days. But Michael Penix, he showed you all of those tools in this game, and seeing him sort of sling that ball with confidence, and seeing him just sort of, even YOLO it a little bit, which is what he was doing at some points last year, was very, very relieving to see. And I like what I've seen. I like what I saw from them in this game in terms of getting everyone involved. Drake London had that big 43-yard catch down the sideline. Kyle Pitts has looked like a different player this season, as you guys mentioned. And Bijan Robinson, I mean, even during the struggles at some points this year, Bijan Robinson has been brilliant. On 4 games, he has 2 100-yard receiving games. I think he leads the NFL right now in yards from scrimmage. He should be the front runner for Offensive Player of the Year. I think right now it's probably between him and Puka when it comes to the NFC. But yeah, I love that Bijan has sort of taken that next step in terms of being. I think we all agree right now Bijan Robinson is the best running back in the NFL. I don't think there should be too much of an argument there. Saquon hasn't looked quite the same as last year. Derrick Henry definitely hasn't looked the same as last year. Jonathan Taylor looks pretty good over in Indianapolis, but I think right now it's the Bijan Robinson show, and I really like that this offense has, starting last year, they have made Bijan the absolute engine of this team. And it's sort of like what we saw with Christian McCaffrey in San Francisco. This team is going to go as Bijan Robinson goes. He is your best player, and let him sort of carry you to the promised land. And utilize him as much as you can. None of that, 50-50 splitting reps with, no offense to Tyler Algier, but none of that like splitting reps with Algier that we were seeing from Arthur Smith a few years ago. I feel like that was just terribly, you were leaving a lot of meat on the bone.
I think with Bijan, it's tough because he's so skilled and he can do so many different things. I think it's tempting to overuse him, and it makes it actually difficult. He kind of makes life difficult on himself because he is so skilled. He can be used so many different ways. If a coach does want to use him in all these different ways, that means there's more for him to learn and like retain and have to understand. And a lot of just different positions athletically, like those like kind of dynamic athletic positions that you're in when you're like split out or behind the back, behind the quarterback or whatever, that you just have to be familiarize yourself with. But yeah, I mean, he's been incredible. And, Kevin, to your point about Kyle Pitts, you were talking about it, and I misspoke. Like I was talking about Charlie Warner being in like the backfield sidecar with Michael Penix and 11 personnel. It's not 11 personnel, it's 12 personnel. So, and that's the big difference is when you're in 12 personnel, other teams are coming out in base, or you're basically daring teams to come out in their base defense. And if they come out in their base defense, sure, you can be in a normal, like, set with Kyle Pitts in line, Charlie Warner kind of to the side of Penix and like a pistol setup, or geared to run the ball. Or you can be with Charlie Warner, sidecar and shotgun, with like a bunch set of Drake London, Darnell Mooney, and Bijan Robinson, and Kyle Pitts on the other side playing the X against potentially a base defense from the other team. And it just creates mismatches all over the field. So I think that while Bijan is important to that equation, Kyle Pitts is also really important to that equation in being able to use, him in these different ways. And I think that he's showing an effectiveness in being able to do that we haven't really seen, at least I would say, like, since his rookie year, but I even feel like he's been even better this year. I feel like he's been more efficient, just like with the opportunities that he's had to make an impact on games. And, because the Falcons have amassed so many talented players on offense now, he's not going to be, fed in the same way he was when he was a rookie. But if he can just be as efficient as he's been so far this season, it's going to open up things for him. He's going to get his numbers, but it's going to open up so many things for other players as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think the emergence of Kyle Pitts, and like this is kind of his like first few years that I think all kind of built towards this, because I think Arthur Smith really did put in the work to try to make Pitts into a better blocker, and I think the Falcons have finally started to benefit from that. I think Pitts is a respectable blocker now. He's not on Charlie Werner's level. He's not on like an inline tight end blocking specialist level. No one is expecting that of him, but he's better than a wide receiver as a blocker like that, and that's really what you need. And I think with him offering you that blocking, which is better than a receiver, he's also better than almost any other than the most elite inline tight end blocker, like blocking guys as a receiver. He's far more dynamic and dangerous in that way. He really does present that conundrum to teams when he's lined up in the slot or even as an attached tight end. How do you defend it? Do you go to base or do you go to nickel? And really, linebackers, and like if you have a great nickel corner that's not small, that's probably the ideal matchup there with Pitts, but most linebackers can't keep up with him, and most nickels are just too small. And now that Pitts is kind of playing with that chip on his shoulder and not really, he's not really having it anymore from these guys. I mean, we're seeing him push dudes away and fighting through contact and all this. I think in years past, some of these guys were giving him more fits, but it doesn't seem to be affecting him to the same level this year. Him taking that step, I think, has really unlocked something unique for this offense, which is their ability to play 12 and make it effectively look like 11. And I think exactly. that's the best thing I think that Zach Robinson has done for this team so far, is really embrace that personnel, not stick closely to that sort of Rams ethos of we're going to play 11 and we're going to have the three receivers out on every play and it's going to be the same three guys and all. They've moved away from that, I think, this year, and have been willing to buck trends with this 12 personnel. The Falcons play by far the most 12 of any team in the NFL, and I think that's the best thing that Robinson has done. There's definitely things that I have bones to pick with Robinson about the lack of play action. Perhaps that's something they're going to work on over this bye week, implementing more of that and getting this offense where it needs to be, fixing the communication problems. Because again, I think if you're having communication issues, that's probably part of the reason they don't want Penix turning his back to the defense, is because we don't want to take any time away from his ability to read and make the correct, decisions with the football. If there's issues getting the play in and he's not having a lot of time pre-snap to be able to diagnose stuff, we don't really want him turning his back to the defense too during the play. I wonder how much that's playing into the lack of play action, although, Robinson, to be honest, never really been a huge play action user, even last year. So I hope it's something they're going to work to incorporate more of. But
the other thing they need to sort of fix a little bit is, even in this win against Washington, they were still all too predictable when it came to their formations and what players they were running out of it. I think the pistol, they were still running, it was still a run play out of the pistol like 70% of the time. And whenever they're in the shotgun, they were still passing the ball like over 80% of the time. So that's not something you're going to be able to get away with in the NFL for much longer, for too long, if the other team knows if it's going to be a run or a pass.
Yeah.
And Kevin, I know you've been talking about Penix with regards to the play action stuff, about that being a strength of his when he was at Washington. And I did just want to go back and look at that, because I wasn't sure. And sure enough, you were correct on that to a great extent. I think every year, I think he had the higher PFF grades, at least in play action versus any other, a non-play action pass basically, or screens. He was a 93 grade on play action passes his senior year, or his last year at Washington. 18 big time throws and no turnover worthy plays on those play actions. Now I would need to go back. There's probably it's worth investigating this a little bit more and seeing just how those play actions looked, whether that was just holding the ball in front of you for a read where you're not turning your back to the defense. Because I noticed in this game, there was only one of those play actions that they called where Penix was not actually turning his back. On every other play, so there was one where he just handed the ball off, or faked the handoff in front of him through that corner route to Casey Washington. But on every other play action, I was also, maybe it's coincidence, I don't know. But on every other one, it was a fake to, how is this? It was a fake to the right, whatever way. He was faking in the way where he had to spin around, do a full spin around instead of as a left-handed quarterback. Yeah, and it was never a play action to his left where he could just kind of go to the left and then just be in his natural setup without having to turn his back. So I don't know if that's something by design, if it's, it's a better action, there's better action to get defenses to bite when he is, doing it to the right and turning around, whether, teams know they want to run to the right in general, and that be the reason they want to have the action going that way. But just thought that was interesting. But you were definitely right that in college he was basically great on play action pretty much every single year.
Yeah, and I think last year the reason play action wasn't a huge part of the offense is because Kirk Cousins simply couldn't do it. And not because Kirk Cousins can't execute play action. He's done that well throughout his career. Literally last year, he wasn't healthy enough to do it. He couldn't hit his landmarks, and the plays were behind schedule as a result. And I think when you're inserting Penix in late in the season, you're not going to exactly just tear up the playbook and then redo it for Penix with 5 games left. You're just not going to do it. So, that's part of it. This year, I don't really get the justification for it. Again, I think maybe they were really concerned that, Elijah Wilkinson was going to be just a total disaster, and we can't really have Penix taking an extra second to execute the play action because he might be murdered by the time he gets out of that fake. That hasn't been the case. I think Elijah Wilkinson has been better than anyone expected. Not a great pass protector certainly, but has been an impactful run blocker. And at this point, I don't think Wilkinson's getting benched. I mean, I think they're going to keep him in. Once Storm Norton gets back, and then you're going to hopefully be able to benefit from just having Storm Norton available just in case. But yeah, they have to use more play action. They have to be better. I agree. I do wonder if it's just the play designs that you typically use are all going to have that action to the right, because that's how 90% of quarterbacks are going to do it. Maybe you have to adjust that for your left-handed quarterback. And maybe that is something that is one of those things that you think about. When we talk about it, it's oh yeah, that's obvious, but it's maybe that's not something that people necessarily think about until you actually see it, and you're oh wait, we need to actually do these plays backwards because Penix is left-handed, and that's kind of until you actually started trying to run these plays in a real situation, you might not notice something like that. So I want to give people the benefit of the doubt. That's kind of far down the like tree sort of thing. So maybe that's something they could work on during the bye, kind of resetting some of these plays, fixing it in some way. But that's the nice thing about this bye, and that's kind of where we're going now, which is the Falcons have some injuries, but most of them are minor, thankfully. And we could be getting guys like AJ Terrell back. We mentioned Storm Norton. We haven't heard much about him, but his timeline was always sort of putting him back around the bye week. So just having him back, we were hoping like that we wouldn't be desperately needing him to like just jump back into the starting lineup. At this point, doesn't seem like that's necessary, thankfully. But having him back as just a really reliable swing tackle to have ready to go. I mean, look around the NFL at the state of the offensive tackle position, and you'll just realize how valuable Storm Norton probably is, and apparently how valuable Elijah Wilkinson is. I think about how many teams, Joe, do you think would be happy to have Elijah Wilkinson starting for them right now? I can think of like 5 probably at least.
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
It's kind of shocking, but shout out to Wilkinson, but I think maybe it's more of like just Falcons coaching shout out, because I honestly can't remember a time that this team has had to put in a backup offensive lineman, and it was a total disaster. Like since like over the last couple of years, like it hasn't always been good, but it's never been like, oh, this is just in school, and like now like our offensive line is just a nightmare. So shout out to Dwayne Ledford, I think is part of it, and also shout out to Wilkinson for not only like stepping into the role, but being like, yes, I can transition back to tackle that I haven't played in like 3 years, and I can do it in 2 weeks, and I can be ready for week 1. And I thought that move was dumb. I thought they should have done Bergeron and all this stuff, and the Falcons proved me wrong. Obviously, Wilkinson has been just fine at right tackle, so shout out to them. But
I think Dwayne Ledford and Nate Hawley, the offensive and defensive line coaches, are probably the best thing this team has going for it when it comes to a coaching like perspective. And I mean, of course, like Jeff Ulbrich has been great, but these assistant coaches that nobody really talks about are sort of the lifeblood of these football teams, because these are the guys that are, working hands-on with these players day in and day out. And these are the coaches that these players have the most interaction with, like even on an NFL Sunday. Like Nate Ollie's the one that's, around those defensive linemen more than anyone. Dwayne Ledford's the one that's, talking with Elijah Wilkinson and some of these other guys more than anyone. And I think the Falcons made a home run hire with Nate Ollie. I think that was very widely praised, given Nate Ollie's track record in the NFL. And he's been great. Like he's been wonderful. Like I don't remember the last time a Falcons defensive line has looked this good. It's been so long. And then Dwayne Ledford, of course, like this offensive line, I think in 2022 just went from being, below average to just straight up elite. And they've just remained, for the most part, elite year in and year out. And Dwayne Ledford, I mean, he's gotten no shortage of praise from this show for all of those years. And he continues, he just continues working just as well as he ever has before. So I think those two guys are sort of the unsung heroes, the unsung MVPs of this team right now.
I'm glad you mentioned that about Ollie in particular. I was going to mention this when we were talking about those guys earlier in the show, but like he vibes really well with them. I think just personally too, just like with the kind of person, the kind of guy that he is. And I think he's also the kind of coach that is willing to maybe overlook some deficiencies if he really does see that you have this enthusiasm to be able to do this one thing that he wants, to be this disruptive force, which I think that he sees in these guys like Rook and Brandon Dorlus and even Zach.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think for Ollie, like that was always a big one. I know that, Trayshawn made a point of this back when Jay Rogers, last year's defensive line coach was hired. It was like, Jay Rogers does not have a good track record. Like I'm really questioning the decision to hire this guy. And I was like, yeah, we'll have to see and all this. And he was absolutely right. I think the defensive line just completely regressed last year. Part of that's obviously Lake's scheme was just not a good fit. And, we've kicked the dead horse of Jimmy Lake enough, but like, just nothing really went right with that hire and several of those assistants. But Ollie's like the opposite. I mean, this is a guy I think that has a great track record pretty much everywhere he's gone. And I think the Falcons were super wise to scoop him up immediately and make sure they were the team to give him the defensive line job and not let someone else do it. He's got tremendous energy. I think he just, like you said, he's the perfect, I think, defensive line coach for a young D-line room who's telling them exactly what they want. They don't want to hear, you need to sit there for 2 seconds, watch 2 gaps, and then maybe you can do something fun. It's like, no, get upfield and get your hands on the runner or scare the shit out of the quarterback. And if you're not doing that, then you're not doing it right. And, if you can get a sack, that would be great. But, and this type of scheme has its own weaknesses, but I think everyone's bought in, and it's simple. And that's, I think, why it's so much more effective this year, is that the Fangio defense, that style that they were trying to run last year, can be very effective. We've seen Vic Fangio have a lot of success doing it. It's really hard. It's very complicated. There's a lot of moving parts, and if these guys don't have it down 100%, it's going to look awful because there's going to be mistakes, and if people aren't all on point together, it causes great problems. And I think that was just not a good match for this team last year. It was asking a lot of these guys, and I think they kind of pivoted to the exact opposite, which is a very simple scheme, very aggressive blitzing, simple coverage rules, and just like, we're just going to beat them. We're going to get upfield, we're going to give them hell, and we're going to go do what we can to just cause issues, cause problems for people. And I think the Falcons have done a good job of that this year. And I like the new scheme, and go for it.
I remember talking to Zach in training camp, and he was saying, like, this defense just lets us use our superpowers. That's the way they talk about it. And when we talked to Jeff Ulbrich in the offseason when he was hired, I can't remember I don't think it was his introductory press conference, but it would have been one of those coaching availabilities during OTAs where he was kind of downplaying just how much a defensive coordinator really affects the game with like the scheme, the tactics that they're putting out there. He's like, it comes down to the players. The players need to win their one-on-one battles, and it's our job to just put them in the best positions to win, allow them to feel as aggressive and able to use their strengths as possible. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they have to be the ones who go out and play the game. I think that's basically what we're seeing here, and the players are just responding really well to it.
Yeah, totally agree. Adnan, what do you think about the trajectory of this? You like the new coaching?
Oh yeah. I mean, on the defensive side, Jeff Ulbrich. Look, Jeff Ulbrich wasn't an inspiring hire when he was first announced. I remember he wasn't, one of like my top guys. What we talked about it like on the show, it was like, okay, Jeff Ulbrich was hired, and it's like it's fine. It was nice getting an adult in the room because I don't think Jimmy Lake was qualified to, run a defense at the NFL level by any means. So we knew he was going to be an upgrade over what the Falcons had, but the bar was very, very low there. And he's definitely exceeded my expectations. Like I knew Ulbrich would be a fine defensive coordinator, but he's been a very, very good defensive coordinator so far. And I mean, we did feel the energy of it during training camp for sure. Like you saw the defense during camp was sort of flying around. Ulbrich was coming into the press conferences, in front of the media with a lot of his own energy. There were those days where, I mean, the defense just punched the ball, out of the hands of the offense so many times to the point where it had people questioning like, does Drake London have a fumbling problem? Because he got the ball punched out like 2 or 3 times, like during one of those days. But yeah, it's been, and again, I do think that some of these assistant coach hirings that they brought in along with Ulbrich, in particular Nate Ollie, I feel like that has sort of set him up to succeed as well. So yeah, I've been very pleased with what I've seen from what they've done with the coaching on the defensive side of the ball. Now on the offensive side of the ball, I think our expectations of Zach Robinson were a little higher than what we've seen so far, but hopefully they can utilize this bye week, add in some wrinkles, and come out of it doing what we were hoping that they were going to do from a success standpoint, coming into it. So sometimes it takes a few weeks. It's a slow start, and I hope that that's the case here, because if this offense can get humming, and if this defense can, stay, I'm not even saying elite. This defense can be, overall average. We're not asking for much. We haven't been asking for much for a decade with this defense. Then I think this team can, make a very firm playoff push. But, it will be up to, the coaching staff, and in particular, I think Zach Robinson to sort of, get his act together just a little bit coming out of that bye week to really have that offense doing what it's supposed to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's impressive. And I'm happy we're here, and this kind of dovetails into our final topic, which is sort of our thoughts now. We're going into the bye. It's early to be having this conversation, but it is the bye week, so it's kind of the time for it. Is this team's 2-2. They got most of the season still ahead of them, 12 more games. And how do we feel about this? And to me, I think they're right on track with what they have needed to do so far. Obviously, like we mentioned earlier, if they could have won the 2 division games, that would have been better. But not the worst thing in the world to win 2 games against potential wild card competitors, especially Washington. I mean, I don't know if the Vikings are going to be worth a damn or not. We'll see. But we got a tough 2-game stretch coming up after this. Obviously, the Bills on Monday Night Football. Not really a game that you're expecting to win, but could be a good litmus test. And look, the Bills haven't been invulnerable. I mean, the Saints were within a score the entire game up until the fourth quarter, and they struggled against the Dolphins. That's a division game, but we know the Bills have their weaknesses, particularly against the run, and maybe they'll be healthier by then, but maybe not. I mean, so Falcons could be getting AJ Terrell back, could be getting some guys back off of IR. We'll see. But Joe, sort of how are you feeling at this stage about the rest of the season? Do you still think this is a potential playoff contender, or are you kind of reevaluating your stance on this team?
No, I do, and I think that they'll contend for the division. I think that they're a playoff team. I think I don't remember exactly what I would have said. I'm sure I said different things at different points during the offseason as to a record prediction for what they would be, but and you never know with injuries what could happen. But when you just look at the schedule and what they've got in front of them and where they are at this point in time, you would still think that, despite the fact they've got, a couple tough games coming up against Buffalo and San Francisco, that stretch, Miami, New England, Indianapolis, obviously a more difficult game, but that's just going to be a difficult game for both teams, like playing out in Germany. It's going to be a weird one, probably not going to get either team kind of at their best. So, an odd one there, but then after that, you still have Carolina and then the Saints and then the Jets, who are still winless at this point. So you still have a bunch of winnable games during that stretch. And I think that stretch is going to be kind of what tells the tale for this team. Remember, it was the Arthur Smith's last year. They lost their season losing 3 very winnable games in the middle of that season, where if they win 2 of the 3, they probably make the playoffs, being losses to the Titans, the Vikings, that was the Josh Dobbs game, and the Cardinals. All 3 of those games I thought were very winnable for them. And so can they take advantage of this portion, this middle portion of the schedule? I think that's going to be, kind of leading back to what I said at the top. Like, can they just go from strength to strength from week to week and keep that level high? And it's not to say that there won't be some minor dips, but you just obviously can't have anything like what happened in week 3 happen ever again. And I also think it'll be interesting to see the way that teams come out of this bye and, play Michael Penix tactically. I thought that Washington may have made a mistake, although it's kind of Dan Quinn's, MO to kind of run a cover 3 system, but there was a lot of middle field closed, which I thought was a mistake. I felt like he's just been more limited and hesitant against some of these split safety looks that he's gotten in much of the first 3 weeks, especially with those safeties playing super deep and, giving the look that you're just not going to be able to throw it deep on us. So you're just going to have to pick the underneath stuff. Was surprised that Washington didn't really do that so much. So we'll see. But I would still think that, everything that this team, had its sights set on heading into the season is still on the table right now.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think, it's going to be really important to keep the momentum going. And just play more consistent football, especially against lesser opponents. Like the Panthers are a perfect example. You gotta beat that team.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10. So that's your one. That's your one. If you want to be a serious playoff contender, you can't be losing that game because, again, things are going to change, right? Like the Colts look way better than expected. The 49ers look a lot more beatable than expected. So, like, it's going to ebb and flow with some of these teams, but you got to take care of business when you get that favorable matchup. And the one thing I think the Falcons can always lean on is this run game. And I think that they've shown a commitment to do that. The Vikings was the perfect example where they were like, we can't really throw here. We're just gonna run Bijan. We're just gonna run Bijan, and then once we have a big enough lead, Algier get in there and close it out. So hopefully they'll be able to have success doing that. And if the run game can be good enough, it could be their calling card. We'll see against the Bills. Like that could be their ticket to holding down the Bills, is to make it a short game and just try to grind out long possessions and keep Josh Allen off the field as much as possible, because this defense, this defense could probably stop Josh Allen a handful of times, but sooner or later they're going to score. So we really need the offense to show up there.
I'll tell you, obviously Josh Allen's always going to be a threat in any game, but I'm just as scared as about James Cook in this game for the Falcons, especially the way that they were getting gashed at times against Washington. So that'll be an interesting one as well.
Yeah, it's a good run game there too. So we'll see how that goes. Adnan, how are you feeling right now? You feeling good about the rest of the season, or are you adjusting down? I know after week 3 we were about to jump off the cliff, so definitely a harder discussion now.
I feel all right. I feel okay. I think they're where they needed to be a quarter into it. Like we're talking, they had to win 2 of these first 4 games because the Bills and 49ers were looking very scary. But like you said, maybe the 49ers game, now that all of a sudden looks a lot more winnable because, that team is just the walking wounded right now. And we'll see if those injuries heal in these next few weeks. But it's if you can sort of come out of this, even at 3-3. Had you told me before the season started that this team will be 3-3, I'd be dancing in the streets.
Yeah.
Especially, after that, you have that, you have the Dolphins who look like, sort of a mess right now. And then New England looks a lot better. Indianapolis is going to be a very weird game, like you alluded to, Joe. But then you look at the Bucks. Like the division is absolutely in play. It's absolutely, even though I think this team messed up with that Panthers game in more ways than one, given the fact that I do think Tampa is going to win that tiebreaker. But the Bucks' schedule right now coming up, looking at it, they have Seattle next, who is, Seattle's been good. They're not an easy opponent, especially up in the Pacific Northwest. Then they have to come back home for San Francisco. Same thing with San Francisco, very hurt. But then, the Lions, the Saints is a divisional game. Then coming out of the bye, New England, Buffalo, and the Rams. So, we could sort of see we can see a shift here in the coming weeks, where maybe the Falcons, if they get their act together and they play well out of the bye week, maybe they overtake that the top of the division, and all of a sudden going into that massive game in week 15, that could be the decider of everything, because the last 3 weeks for the Buccaneers are just going to be Panthers, Dolphins, Panthers. So the Falcons really want to build up a bit of a lead if they do want to take this division. But even outside of the division, if you don't win it, the wild card can be your parachute. I think beating the Vikings and Commanders took a couple of steps toward that. I think Washington is going to be a firm divisional or a firm wild card candidate this season in particular. But everything's there. Everything's there to play for the Falcons. You're in a fine spot, 2-2, going into the bye week. Come out of it motivated. Like, please do not come out of the bye week the way you came out of that Vikings game, because this league will humble you very, very quickly if you're not motivated and if you're not disciplined. It's there. Like I hope I can speak with my head or I can speak with my heart. I'm choosing to go with my heart and just saying, please, just make the playoffs this year. Like, for the love of God, it's been 8 years. Like, come on, like we got to do it. We got to
Come
do
on,
it.
guys. Come on.
Yeah,
Yeah, please. Like, this is the year. Like, and that's the thing with the Bucks is, like, we'll see how they fare over the course of the season, but that team is devastated. And, like, I mean, Greg Gaines, like, they haven't called it a torn pec yet, but when you see pec injuries that people aren't practicing, it's like, how long is it going to be before you announce this as a torn pec? And Baker's not practicing now with multiple injuries. He's been taking a beating, and he's going to play through it, I'm sure. But like sooner or later, it catches up to you.
He's in a walking boot right
now.
Yeah,
and they were like, "Oh, he hasn't been ruled out yet." Be serious, man. He's on crutches. Like, what? Come on. What are you serious? Like, oh yeah, he's on crutches today. He'll be fine by Sunday though. Yeah, he'll be good. Yeah. Come on, man. Like, are you serious with this? That's a serious injury. I think that's a multi-week injury for Bucky Irving, and they've downplayed it a lot, but that team is just so banged up. And Mike Evans is not practicing still, and you got Chris Godwin back, but he's kind of having to get worked back in, and they just, like, Tyke Smith isn't practicing now. Like, so many guys are on that injury report. Like, they don't have an easy schedule either. Like, they still have to play a lot of good teams. And, I wonder if it's like a situation where the Falcons could just sit back this week, watch the Bucks lose again, and then have a chance to tie it up, next week with a win. And just like, and again, it's not even saying, like, I think the Bucks are a very good team, but sooner or later that those injuries are going to catch up with you. And Baker has been, I think, by far the luckiest quarterback in the NFL this year with regards to turnovers. I think he leads the league in turnover-worthy plays and has 1 interception. And he only threw that last week at the end of the game, when I think he has 11 turnover-worthy throws and 1 interception, and that's not going to hold up. So
Kevin, they'll actually the Falcons will see them play twice before the Falcons actually play the Bills on Monday night.
Yeah, the Falcons could be in a situation where no matter if they win, they'll actually take the lead, because the Bucks could be 3-3 at that point, and the Falcons would be 3-2, so, or something like that. So yeah, which would be funny. But they'd have to beat the Bills to accomplish that. So maybe we don't get too far ahead of ourselves there. But I mean, this is a situation where the Falcons have to take advantage, right? Like, the Bucks, I think, have been mortal the last few years. The Falcons have failed to take advantage. If the Bucks are beat up this year and they continue to lose guys, like, you have to be able to just get in front of them and win 10 games. That's all they would have needed to do. The last several years, just win 10 games. Doesn't really matter what the Bucks do. Doesn't matter that you lost the first game. Just win 10, 11 games. They may not be able to match that. So hopefully this will be the year that they accomplish it. I'm feeling decently good about their chances after this win. Obviously, if you would have asked me last week, I would have said hell no. But that's what happens in September. We don't have very many games, so the sample size is small. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs here. But
I want to reinforce, though, that I think it's the things that we saw in the game specifically that give so I'll always say for me, but probably for you guys as well, that's what gives me confidence about what this team can be going forward. Was you saw some of the things offensively that you wanted to see, that you thought they were going to be providing from week 1. Unfortunately, they didn't. But, you do start to see some progress with where this offense is going.
Yeah, I agree. I think that we've seen some positive signs. We need to see more play action. But, this team, I think they're doing some good things offensively. Penix is, this was a big bounce back. And again, it wasn't like, shout out to Corey Woodruff at the Falcoholic, who was like really having a hard time after
Corey was panic DMing me last week.
This poor man. Yeah. Corey is the most optimistic Falcons fan I've ever met, and he was like jumping off the cliff after that. And
Corey, it's like, man, if the Falcons broke you, they really went too far this time.
Yeah, and I was like, hey, Corey, I think it's gonna be okay. Like with Penix specifically, Penix has dealt with so much adversity. He's had to transfer and start over. He's had 2 season-ending injuries. He's dealt with so much crap and bad stuff, and just bounced back and continue to get better. It wasn't a huge concern for me personally, and I tried to communicate that to everybody. And Penix is not a guy that's going to get like emotionally or psychologically defeated. But that doesn't mean he's immune from bad games. But I don't think he's the guy that's going to crumble. I think that's part of the reason that the Falcons were high on him, and this was a great example of that. Just got back on the horse, and just delivered arguably his best game as a pro. And we're going to see a lot more games like this than we are the bad games. The bad games will still come. We're going to get some stinkers. It's going to happen, but we need more bad or more good than bad. And the good news is the Falcons can probably lean on their run game if Penix is having an off day especially against some of these defenses that they're going to be playing. And if the Falcons defense is good, which right now it's not just good, it's great. So that could help out a lot too. So I think the Falcons have a winning formula where if they had to fall back to being a ground and pound, like win with defense and run game team, they can win that way. We saw them do it against the Vikings, and that's not a game I thought this team could win, and they did it really well that week. So I think having that to fall back on is always nice. I think Penix can also provide you the explosive passing and go toe-to-toe with some of these quarterbacks that you need to compete at the highest level. But again, this is a growing season for him and this offense, and I would try to caution people not to put Penix on some kind of pedestal where it's like now we're expecting him to be Matt Ryan or something and just, deliver elite passing like most weeks. And I think that's too much to expect from a young quarterback. And I would just pump the brakes a little bit on that expectation if you have it. But I still think we're going to be happy with what we see throughout the course of the season from Michael Penix. And hopefully Zach Robinson could come around too. Again, still a young offensive coordinator going into his second season, has not necessarily had a clean situation to work with, having to switch quarterbacks and various things, but hopefully he can continue to evolve as a play caller. And I think, again, against the Commanders, I think we saw a more cohesive game plan. We saw some more effective play action usage. We saw them attacking downfield more. And again, I agree with what you said, Joe. Like, it was kind of interesting that the Commanders tried to do kind of what the Panthers did on several occasions where they showed cover 2 and then rotated out of it. Penix did not fall for it though. He is having none of that this time. I think that strategy is probably not going to work for teams anymore. I think Penix has kind of figured that out, that they're going to try to get him to back off with showing cover 2, but he's going to be looking for that now. So that's a quick adjustment on his part. But again, he still has to demonstrate that he can throw and beat cover 2, or 2 high shells or whatever it is the teams are playing, be willing to attack, the intermediate middle, which is going to be open against those 2 high shells a lot. And I think if he can do that, he can improve, some of his short accuracy, some of his over the middle, decision making and throws. He has the bones of an elite quarterback. I mean, we know his arm talent is out of this world, and he definitely has, I think, the mentality for the position, and he's a better runner than I think he gets credit for too. He's got speed. I think he's got pretty good sense of where to go and how to get he's nailed some first down runs, very low margin, but that's the type of feel for where exactly you have to be and by what exact moment to get into the end zone or get to the first down. That's not something you could teach. I think he's got a good kinesthetic feel for how he needs to run the football. Not ever going to be a running quarterback, but I think a better athlete and a better, opportunistic scrambler maybe than anybody was expecting. And that's a nice development, because I think people were worried after last year where he had the lowest scramble rate of any quarterback in the NFL is is he just got nothing to offer there? And I think he clearly does. So I'm enthused by what we've seen from Penix, and I just understand. I think after watching, Desmond Ridder, who I can't talk about anymore, and other quarterbacks, I just feel Penix is so much better, and I think it's obvious that he's definitely on a different level than the quarterbacks the Falcons have had since Matt Ryan. He's in that category of a guy that you feel confident in going forward. And we won't know for a year or two if he is a franchise quarterback. That's just how it goes. But I feel good about it. I feel good about the trajectory. And I think the Falcons are, given the defense's strides and their play at this point, I think I would still bet on them being a 10-win team and really competing for the playoffs. So,
Kevin, I think long-term for Penix, I think the ceiling is still sky high. The fact that we're even, I feel like, talking about him in the way that we are this early into his career says a lot about where he is right now. And listen, the Carolina game was there's just no other way. There's no sugarcoating it. It was just terrible. It was absolutely terrible. Game. It's about as bad as it gets. Even, I mentioned the EPA. It's literally the 3rd worst game a quarterback has had this year, but he's also had among the best games a quarterback has had this year in the game against Washington. And what he was showing, in those 3 starts last year, I just thought sets him apart in so many ways. And I just feel like from the national talk about him, I feel like he doesn't get a lot of the leeway that some of these other quarterbacks get. Now, I think that it's understandable because the Falcons have gone to him over, a very pricey quarterback, and they have that pricey quarterback sitting on the bench behind him. I think it's one of the reasons why it stings when you're losing a game and he's playing as poorly as he is, like that Carolina game, and you've just got this, on the bench, you've got Kirk Cousins. But that leads me to also one thing I wanted to add about, because I know that there were some questions about in the press conferences about, like, is Penix, like, are you going to stick with Penix? Like, is your long-term guy? I want to give some benefit of the doubt to the reporters that were asking those questions, where sometimes as a reporter, you have to ask a question that you don't necessarily believe yourself, but you have to get the answer on record from the subject. And so I think that was kind of the goal probably of some of those questions, was that at least, like, they probably knew what was coming when they asked those questions, but you just need to hear it from the coach or whoever you're asking.
Yeah, that makes sense to me for sure. But yeah, we got, I don't think anyone actually thought Kirk Cousins was threatening for the starting job, for the record. Yeah, I don't think anyone was. I mean, if there were some people in my mentions that were definitely floating the idea of Kirk Cousins being the starter, which, okay, you can have that take, I guess. Not a lot of people are going to be with you on that island, but all right. We got to keep playing consistent football, and I think that's the big thing. Is it's just this team has really struggled with consistency, and hopefully that 0-30 shutout was the wake-up call, the kick in the ass. These guys need to not do that again. That's my hope, that we can get something good out of what was truly one of the worst games of the last 10 years for this franchise. So hopefully we can move on from that. We had a couple donations here. We got Alex Foster with the $5 saying, are there any adjustments or players we could add to special teams? I just wonder because they seem shaky at times. Maybe that's even too generous. I mean, I think they have, like, I think they missed Kadero Hodge last week. That's for sure. I mean, he's one of their primary gunners. And, I think Natrone Brooks is also one of their primary guys. And when he went out, they had to kind of shuffle folks around. I think they kind of messed up by not investing in returner more. I mean, I think Jamal Agnew, when he's healthy, is a good returner, but his thing is that he hasn't been able to stay healthy for years, and we already saw, he missed 2 games already. So
he missed almost all training camp.
Yeah, so it's like Agnew's great when he's healthy, and he was still kind of, I think, working back this week, but I think it's pretty clear that returner is not some niche position anymore. Like, the return game is serious now, especially the kick return game. You can't hide or go cheap at returner anymore. And hopefully, the Falcons will take that position a little more seriously going forward. That's my hope. But I don't know who they could add now that would be like a big boost there. But yeah.
Well, I'd add when Troy Anderson comes off of PUP. I know that there was, rightful, I think, questioning about whether he should have been playing on special teams at the time, considering he was an important starter on defense. But if he's not an important starter on defense at this point, I think he's an elite special teams player, just like his ability to run and tackle.
Yeah. Yeah, go ahead, Adnan. Yeah.
I'm on record. Troy, if you get anything out of Troy Anderson this year, that's a win. Like, if you can get a few special team snaps, that's more than I'm expecting from Troy Anderson.
Yeah, he's a great special teams guy. So again, that's a good problem to have. Like, if you can get him back just playing I think he's definitely, like, at least a, like, serviceable defensive player. Like, I mean, I still think he has potential, but he just hasn't been able to stay healthy. Like, I'm not giving him a big extension, but I'd be willing to, like, re-sign him, and maybe if we could get him playing special teams this year and being a good reserve, it's not what you want from a second-round pick, but I would take it at this point.
Also, no more Xavier Watts on special teams.
Yes, please no.
Yeah.
Like, your safety, and I know a lot of people are in my mention saying, "Oh, starters play special teams." Not when the safety position is as thin as it is for the Falcons. Like, you don't have safety, you don't have bodies, among your, like, safety position for you to be throwing your starters out there, to potentially get hurt. And thank God that Xavier Watts' injury wasn't serious and that he came back later in the game. But can you imagine if that was a very serious injury? All of a sudden, like, it's the same thing as the Troy Anderson situation last year.
Yeah, and I think on these returns with the kickoff coming back, I'm still I know they're trying to like say that we're going to address the dangerous aspect of the kick return by changing these guys and putting them up on the other side of the field. There's still some massive collisions on some of these returns, and it just feels like you're seeing a lot of injuries happen on those plays, and I wonder if teams in general are going to have to think about just like their general roster composition in terms of how they staff up their game day rosters in order to ensure that they have the types of players who can be out there for that and do a good enough job without having to rely on starters. Because it does feel like anyone could, especially on those kickoff returns and coverages, some big collisions that can cause injuries. So I wouldn't want any starters out there on those particular plays.
Yeah, and I personally love the new return rules. I think the return is such an important play.
So do I.
That it sucks that it was kind of litigated out of the NFL for so long. But you raise a great point, which is like we really can't be risking starters here. And the roster math makes it really difficult, especially if you have injuries. And I do hope that like the NFLPA, because this 18th game is coming, but it's a big bargaining chip. The NFL wants this 18th game desperately. So the NFLPA needs to push, I think, for at least 55-man rosters, but probably more like 60, and a second bye. Like, get more guys, get more players, like get rid of the inactive list or minimize it. Get up to 60 guys on these rosters. Like, let NFL teams carry more players. It'll be better for player development. It'll be better for these young guys. It'll basically get teams to invest more in project players, which will be good for the long-term health of the league. You can keep starters off of special teams. You can just have more vested veterans on your roster. Yeah, you're going to have to pay out more money. But you're talking, like, for that 50 through 60 roster spot, we're talking vet minimum contracts, owners, okay? Cry me a river, okay? Like, I just, like...
And those vet minimum roster contracts feed families,
Yes, they do.
While we're talking about special teams, it reminds me of a couple years ago. We were in the locker room after practice for the first time that year, like after training camps. It was our first time being back in there. And I was talking to, a couple of the players about just watching college football over the weekend. And I don't want to say exactly who it was because it was off record, but, I was talking to a player and, I was like, what is the biggest difference? Like when you watch college football, like what's the biggest difference you see in terms of like, the current game, the NFL game? And he was like, it's special teams by far. And it's crazy because this was an offensive lineman, and he's like, it's special teams. These guys are just running around like with their heads cut off, it seems like. And you look around this locker room and there's guys who have made careers playing on special teams. Like,
Mike Ford,
very seriously. Yeah,
they do. Yeah, no, I mean, and I think the Falcons have gone out of their way to try to get some of these guys in here, and I think we should reward that. Like, I think there should be roster spots for special teams experts. And, I think just more roster spots in general, it dilutes the waiver wire, but the waiver wire is already diluted. I mean, come on. Like it's not like you're getting gems out there anyway. So I think you let teams develop more guys, increase the game day rosters and give teams more options to fight injuries and they don't have to make all these tough roster decisions. And, however you need to accomplish that with the CBA and the salary cap, that's, if you want to consult with me, sure, I'll help you out. But, yeah.
But have you guys thought about the billionaires?
Adnan, I admit it. I didn't think about them. Yeah, that's selfish of me. Yeah.
Yeah, those billionaire owners who are going to be making a lot more money off like TV revenue. And I mean, the NFL has that ESPN contract where they now own 10% of ESPN, which is crazy.
Yeah.
But haven't you guys thought about them having to pay 5 more players? Like, come on.
It's a big deal.
Think about the billionaires.
Yeah, that's Adnan raises an excellent point. We should be
if
more.
If we're making prediction on the 18th game, so I've always thought it's going to be they're going to add an 18th game, they'll add a bye week, and then probably cut preseason to some extent. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I wonder if I think they'll go down to 2 preseason games.
Yeah.
Or maybe 1, and they'll just do like an exhibition game or call it something different. Or maybe they'll just do like I wonder if they'll do more of like a scrimmage in training camp, like an official scrimmage that's televised, and then just like 1 preseason game, which is just like the warm-up game or something. But yeah, they're gonna have to cut preseason because it seems like they don't want to go into February more. Like they want to keep the Super Bowl in the same window. I mean, I think they could push it a week. I mean, there's nothing going on in February. Like, I mean, you could do whatever you want, but they seem really like reluctant to push it more into February. So I don't know, but
yeah, I mean, honestly, like, and I mean, this is a completely separate discussion now, but like, who cares? Like, who cares if they push it like further? Like,
I would prefer that. Yeah, I mean, I don't care. Yeah.
the NFL is the standard. Like the NFL has nobody that they're competing against when it comes to, television time or revenue. Like these other sports leagues, they're scared of the NFL. Like when it comes to
not even sports. I would say just culture,
Nothing.
general
Yeah.
culture. I would say the NFL is like the only remaining like monoculture or whatever you call it.
Yeah,
it's just like it is. Like,
It was Game of Thrones, and now that Game of Thrones is over.
Yeah, exactly. All the
there's nothing else.
TV's
Yeah.
gone. Right.
Yeah, because I mean that's the thing. Like, let's say, and I'm not saying I'm not advocating for this, but you kick the Super Bowl to March. Like, who cares? Like, everyone's gonna watch it no matter what. You extend out the off season a little bit. It's like no matter what you do as the NFL, like it's gonna be profitable. It's gonna work. So I don't know, like, I can't think about, all right, like there's the reluctance to do this and they want to keep it in the same window. And it's like they can do whatever they want, honestly.
Yeah. So we'll see how they do it. I'm curious about that. That'll be a fun offseason topic because I think they're pushing for that 18th game as soon as they can. So we'll see how that develops. But real quick, got a couple more. Brandon with the 2 says, want to give flowers to Xavier Watts, who I believe was the biggest steal for us. He was my number 1 safety. Number 1 safety, Brandon. Nice. I wasn't even that rich. I had Starks number 1 and Watts too. But yeah, Watts has been awesome. No doubt about that. Love that they got him in the late 3rd too. That was not on my bingo card. The NFL's stupid sometimes. We got George Costanza with a couple here. Thanks, George. Welcome in. Love to see you always. Says, unless we see some major improvements, thinking we still need to eventually part ways with Zach Robinson. Maybe OK State wants him. Honestly, 70% of the time seems like the play is obvious to the announcer, so how much more is it to the defense? Think he needs to improve fast. The Carolina game was unacceptable. Yeah, I mean, Robinson's definitely the one that I think needs to continue to develop and get better, and hopefully he and Penix can grow together, and ultimately that'll be a good marriage there. But yeah, week 3 was alarming to say the least. And George is shouting out your description of Bryce Young as a 2-pack of ass. Yeah.
That is an accurate description. Hey, Bryce, not every game is against the Falcons, Bryce.
Yeah. He becomes Super Saiyan for the Falcons games, and then he's just super bad for the other games, I guess. But 35th best QB in the NFL. Yeah.
My hope is the Falcons successfully bamboozle the Panthers into thinking that Bryce Young is a franchise player.
Give him a big extension, Carolina. Yeah, he needs it. But yeah, he also says F Bobby Petrino, as always. Yep. Strong agree there. And then we got one more from George here. It says, just for fun, imagine if prime Devin Hester was playing right now with these kickoff rules. How big of a contract would he be? I would say at least 10 mil. At least. I think you could, if you get an elite returner like that, and Hester showed that he could do some things on offense too eventually, but yeah, like I wonder, like Turpin, the next time he gets a contract, if he continues at his pace, what he would get. But I think Hester could be in line for like 10 mil.
I mean, that would be big. Hester in his career made 30, like in his whole career, so 10 mil.
I can see 10 mil per. Yeah
I mean, it makes sense because think about the yards you're adding, in addition to like how far kickers are kicking it now. A player like him is putting you near field goal range, probably in a lot of returns, and obviously, scoring on a bunch as well.
Yeah. So that one is that's an interesting one. That's a fascinating one, George. But I do think returners are going to get their moment in the sun again here that they've been at. They've been out of the spotlight for a while. I think we're finally going to put some respect on them. And I think the Falcons could do 2 birds with 1 stone, get either like a dynamic running back 2 to pair with Bijan next year, or maybe a dynamic wide receiver 3 that also these guys return kicks that are great returners. I think they could really use that sort of yards after catch threat in the offense too. Maybe like a 3rd, 4th round pick type of guy there. I don't know. That's what I'm thinking right now. But we're not doing draft takes yet. I know Solaire's probably here and he's probably hoping for the draft takes. But we're not doing draft takes, Solaire. It's not yet. Don't get on that train. But that is something I think to pay attention to. Because I think teams aren't going to be able to cheap out on returners anymore. I think those guys are going to get snapped up and probably move up the draft boards too. So, but yeah, guys, thanks so much for hanging out with us here on this bye-week edition of the Falcoholic Live, presented, of course, by FanDuel. Joe Patrick is at JAPatrick200. Joe, anything else you want to add, and also let the people know where they can find your new show?
No, you can follow me on X at JAPatrick200. There's also clips on Instagram. I'm kind of more there now, but it's just clips from the podcast, which is Joe Patrick on Football, where you can just search for Joe Patrick on Football wherever you get podcasts.
I think it's the only one.
You can watch it. It's on YouTube as well on 929 The Game's YouTube channel. Just subscribe there. And what I say is just like some of the videos when you watch them. That way the algorithm will just start putting them in your feed there.
Absolutely. YouTube. Yeah, go check it out, guys.
Probably do that for the Falcoholic too. Just like it, like the video. That way you get more.
Yeah, I mean, look, like everybody's videos, go subscribe to Joe, go subscribe here. It helps us all out. But yeah, definitely check out Joe's show, because I know if you guys are tuning into this episode, obviously you love Joe's work, so you should go check out that show too. There's room for multiple Falcons shows, okay? Maybe 3 exactly, okay? You can watch this one, you can watch Joe Patrick on Football, and you can watch Locked On Falcons. No other show. No, I'm just kidding. There's plenty of other good folks doing work out there too. But this is if you got the appetite for a lot of shows, I listen to a lot of shows too, so I know some people are just like podcast obsessed. So there's definitely stuff out there for you guys. But thanks again, Joe, for coming on. Glad we could make it work this week.
Always enjoy it.
Absolutely. And then we got Adnan Ikic with us as always. Adnan's at Say Which Way. Anything else you want to add tonight, Adnan?
Just check out thefalcoholic.com and enjoy the bye week. So enjoy a stress-free football Sunday outside of your fantasy teams, of course.
Yeah. The fantasy landscape is a bloodbath. I believe my dynasty team is starting Jeremy McNichols at this point as running back. And I'm still like 4th in scoring. I've had to start McNichols for like 2 weeks now. So, it's because I have Puka, so that helps. But Puka dynasty too. Shout out to that 15th round pick in the dynasty startup for Puka Nacua. So
yeah. Puka, I got him in my startup. Someone took Marvin Harrison over him last year, and I was like, Marvin Harrison has the year that Puka has, his rookie year. It'll be immense.
That was bold.
That was a shiny new toy syndrome type thing that happened for sure.
Yeah.
But big Puka Nacua show, big pro Puka Nacua show.
Always.
Not in the offensive player of the year race though. That's
yeah, he's going to be tough for Bijan to take down. He's on an absolutely insane pace as well. So we'll see. That's going to be a fun one to watch over the course of the season. But guys, I'm Kevin Knight of Falcoholic. Kevin, you know where to find my stuff. As always, check out falcoholic.com as well. Please like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. We're trying to get to 10K subs by the end of the season. We're getting close to 9K now. So if you want to help us out and you haven't done that yet, please do. If you want to leave us a 5-star review in your podcast platform of choice, that really helps us out. So check that out. We got Brandon Brass with the $2. RIP to Solaire's fantasy team. Half the team's on IR. Yeah. Some teams have just fallen on the sword for the rest of the league this year. And shout out to you guys. We'll pour one out for you. That's why you should always play in at least 2 or 3 leagues. So if you're that team in one league, your year's not just totally toast. But shout out to Solaire for toughing it out and trying to work through it here. But guys, thank you so much for tuning into the Falcoholic Live tonight. We will have a Friday show, a special Friday pod. Alan Sturck's going to be joining me. Alan's usually on the post game, but we're going to record sort of a State of the Falcons type of show that's going to be coming out on Friday. Obviously, no game this weekend, so we'll be relaxing, enjoying some football. A stress-free weekend for a change. And then we will be back next week with Tuesday Takes in our normal schedule as we get prepared for a Monday Night Football clash. And Adnan's got one more thing.
back-to-back stress-free Sundays where the Falcons
Yeah.
can't ruin it.
There we
That
go.
Bills game's Monday nighter, so they may ruin your Monday, but they're not ruining your Sunday.
Nope. I can always appreciate that. Hopefully the Falcons can continue to deliver in prime time so that we keep getting those sweet non-Sunday or at least non-Sunday afternoon matchups because those are a lot of fun. I've been enjoying being on prime time. So, guys, thank you so much for joining us tonight on the Falcoholic Live. If you want to support the show, you can do so at Patreon, patreon.com/Falcoholic Live, or you can join up here with the channel memberships as well if you're interested in that. And like I said, we'll be back next week. I'll be back Friday, obviously, with a recorded pod. I'll be out this weekend on a little mini vacay. Obviously, be back next week for Bills prep as we get into the meat of the season here. It's going to be a long haul. No more breaks after this week. So until next time, guys, thank you so much for joining us. Thanks again to Adnan and Joe for joining me tonight. We'll see you guys next time here on the Falcoholic Live and Dirty Birds and Brews.